Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to give it 1 minute to let everyone join and then we'll jump straight in. Hi everyone who's just joined, and we're just giving it a minute to let everyone get in and then we'll get started. Amazing. It is 12:02, so I think we'll get started and let people just join when they come. So thank you again for joining us for today's webinar for Arts for Impact. Today on the call, I have my colleague Sahil from Big Give, and also obviously me from the Big Give team, and then also Anna from MPAC and Katie from Polka, but they'll introduce themselves shortly. Just before we get started, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So at the bottom of your Zoom panel, you'll see a chat box function. Please do click that box, set the replies to everyone, and then you can start to introduce yourself or talk to other people throughout the session. Please do feel free to use that to share ideas or any issues you have as well. You'll also see a Q&A box at the bottom of that Zoom panel. Please do use this to put in any questions and we'll make sure that we address them at the end of the session. And as well, it'll be great if you can make sure you use that box rather than the chat function so we don't lose any of those questions throughout the session. If for any reason you need captions, you should see a More button at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to enable a live transcript of the webinar through that. And finally, as always, we'll be recording the webinar and this will be available to watch on our YouTube channel after the session. I'm due to upload the first webinar from this week, but also this one later on today. And then, of course, if you have any more questions after this, please do send us an email. But without further ado, I think I'll pass straight on to Anna.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Super. Nice to be here today. Thank you very much, Beth and Sahil. So the object of today is to help organisations who are participating in the Arts for Impact campaign in a few weeks by really focusing on a fantastic case study in the form of the Polka Theatre. So I'm joined by Katie Neem. And Katie, could we start by, would you like to introduce yourself and the theatre to our audience?
Sure. Hi, thank you for having me on here. My name's Katie. I'm the Membership and Events Manager at Polka Theatre, which is a children's theatre based in Wimbledon. So we're a quite small organization, but we've been around since the late 70s. So we are a charity as well as a theatre for children.
Super, thank you. And tell us a little bit about your annual programme of events. I'm imagining that in addition to the productions in the theatre, there's all kinds of outreach, etc. as well. I think that's relevant to our impact campaign.
Sure. So as a charity, we kind of focus on a few sort of major kind of projects that are our kind of bread and butter. So the biggest one that we do is called Curtain Up, which is a program that provides free tickets to children in the community who don't have access to attend the theater or experience the arts in any way. So we go out to local schools and we get children in who can't afford school trips and bring them into the theater, as well as working with local refugee groups who might be in the area and places like women's shelters as well, to just kind of try and reach as many people in need in the community as possible with free tickets to the shows. So that's one of our programs. Another one that we do is called Right Here, Right Now, which is with a W. And that is a writing and creative writing program whereby children who are kind of not necessarily struggling, but not excelling either. They're kind of somewhere in the middling range. Maybe they struggle more with creativity and confidence more so than their actual learning. They're nominated by their teachers, and then they come in and we give them kind of a creative learning experience where we kind of help them with their writing skills and kind of just boost their creativity and confidence with theater programs and other creative kind of enterprises. And then our last kind of biggest program that we do for outreach is our Access program, which is the area that we focused on for the Christmas Challenge Big Give campaign that we just did. So the Access program is kind of broken down into two strands. One of them is for the performances that we do. So we offer relaxed performances, captioned, British Sign Language, and then we also do touch tours for children who have sight impairments as well. So they can come and kind of touch the actors and touch some of the props and the set to kind of actually be able to experience what they're hearing. So that's kind of the performance side of the Access program. And then on the workshop side, we also offer workshops to children who have access or learning disabilities. So they come in and we do kind of just creative learning exercises with them, especially children who may not have access to that in their school or in their community. So it's a way to make sure that all children are able to have access to arts and learning activities.
What a brilliant program. Thank you very much. I'm certain who's watching us talk to each other will have similar stories of fabulous work that they're doing in their communities. And I guess that was part of the thinking behind the Arts for Impact campaign, actually, that we're running now, is that by demonstrating the impact, the community benefit, the societal benefit, if you will, of all of this fantastic arts activity, is that a way of generating new philanthropy, new support, using matched funding as an added incentive. So thank you very much for taking us through that. Turning then to specifically your Christmas challenge, you mentioned that the Access program was the specific focus of that, but I'm sort of really interested to how you put your campaign together. How did you structure the planning? Planning is obviously key. We had a seminar with some charities, and I don't know if any of today's participants were also here on Monday, but one of the questions at the end was, how do you structure a really good and successful campaign? And the answers we gave were good planning, good communications, and a really clear ask. So I'd love to hear how you went about structuring your campaign.
Sure. So our campaign was kind of broken down into a 3-tiered approach. So one of them was the Big Give Challenge, which we kind of looked at as one branch of the overall campaign. Another thing that we did was an event that was right in the middle of the Big Give campaign called the Big Bash, which is a family fundraising event. Guests pay £45 for a ticket plus an optional £15 donation for kind of a big day out at Polka, where we have this enormous kind of Christmas themed festive feast with bubbles for the adults and sparkling juice for the little ones. There's face painting, glitter tattoos, crafts, Father Christmas. We had a silent disco this year, which was really good fun. And then after all of that, they then go and sit in and watch one of our Christmas productions. And then they get to leave with an ice cream and a goodie bag as well. So that's kind of the second kind of prong of the overall campaign. And the third thing that we did was an online auction, which I think was kind of the big reason that our campaign was the most successful for this year in particular. So these events are all these elements are all kind of delivered in tandem. They all feed into each other and raise the profile of each other. And they all raise funds towards the Access program. So I guess to give you an idea of kind of how we structure it. So I'll just kind of go through our planning as it started in the summer and then how it led up to the campaign.
Thank you. That'd be very helpful.
Sure. So over the summer prior to the Big Give, I sat down with the marketing team and created a whole marketing campaign to cover each of those 3 elements that I just spoke about. We broke down each element by month and planned out comms, asks, and any other kind of activities related to those, like creating an auction website and event management for the event. And then we just kind of met every other week to make sure that we were keeping on track of all those different bits. So work on the campaign kind of properly started around September time. when we had our first publicity for the Big Bash. Because that one has only a limited number of tickets available, we kind of started with that in terms of the marketing campaign. So we went out with the ticket sales in September. And then that was also when we started emailing the marketing database with the Big Bash and asking our trustees to share news to their own personal and professional networks as well, just kind of letting people know that it was happening.
At that time, did you already know about the fact that it would be part of the Big Give, or was the Big Bash already being organised?
Yes, so we've done the Big Give for a few years in a row now. I think since 2021, I believe. This is before my time at Polka, so I took over the role. So we've always kind of done the Big Bash in conjunction with the Big Give. So they always kind of work together and they fundraise kind of for each other. So all of the funding for the Big Bash goes to the same program as the Big Give. And then at the event as well, we have QR codes that direct people to the Big Give website so that they can donate directly. And mainly it's just kind of our way of getting the information out there, just kind of spreading the news that we are a charity and we are fundraising for these really important activities for children to be able to access the arts equally. So that was all kind of related and they all kind of work together, if you see what I mean.
Super.
I think I skipped August as well. So that was kind of when we started sending out impact reports for last year's champion pledgers so that they could start to get an idea of the impact that their donation had. Last year, our focus was on Curtain Up, which was that ticketing program that I mentioned at the beginning. This year, we were going to do Curtain Up, and in fact, we applied for Curtain Up. But then, literally 2 days after we sent in our application, we had a surprise trust donation towards Curtain Up that pretty much covered it for the whole year, which was great. But then it also meant that we no longer necessarily needed to fundraise for that program for this financial year.
That is a nice program.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was such a nice surprise. But then we did kind of have to change the way that we organized the whole campaign because we decided that we'd rather focus on a different project entirely to make sure that we could kind of cover the bases of all of our different fundraising activities. So I redid the whole application in favor of access instead. And that's kind of what led us to the campaign as it turned out the way that it did.
So I'm interested, sorry to interrupt you there. I'm interested
No.
that you, there will be organisations on this call who have, as you do, a variety of fundraising activities around the year to which this adds to their portfolio. And there'll be others for whom individual fundraising is new. And I suppose if we start with the first group, you always, when you're fundraising, need to be very careful not to cannibalize one set of fundraising for another initiative. And I just wondered how you went about structuring your asks and your planning in order to make sure that what you were doing was incremental rather than just moving money from one time into December.
Sure. The reason that we had initially gone with Curtain Up for this program is because I think it's a bit of an easier ask to the public. It's a really kind of straightforward program where you say, we're raising money to send children to the theater who've never been before. Everybody can kind of get on board with that. It's a really easy kind of public-facing fundraising program. Everybody understands what it means. You don't really need to go into a lot of detail and explanation for it. People understand it's a ticketing scheme. It's kind of straightforward. Once we got the surprise funding for it and we decided to go with access is a little bit more difficult, I think, to get out the details of the program to the public because it's such a multifaceted program. As I was kind of saying at the beginning, with the separation between the workshops as well as the different types of accessible performances that we offer, it's just kind of it's harder to kind of put it out there to the public and kind of give the information that they need to understand why it's important to raise money for. the reason that we went with Access in the end is because it is our most expensive project to fund. So I think one of the ways that we kind of did explain it to the public was by saying it costs us something, it's like £145,000 a year to run the Access program. So if we break it down into, it's like £90,000 for the accessible performances, and then whatever the difference, £50,000 for the workshops. Then I think people started to grasp that it was a lot more difficult to put on than I think people maybe realize. For something like a relaxed performance, it's probably the cheapest accessible performance that we do, because basically all you need to do is take out flashing lights and any kind of steam and keep the house lights on dim. But for something like a BSL interpreted performance, we have to pay the interpreter. They have to be sent the scripts in advance. They have to have time to go over it all with the cast and the crew as well, to know like where they need to stand, and if anything happens in the show that they need to sign that's not necessarily in the script. So it does take a lot of their time, and just paying all these different people and just making sure that you get all that done in advance. It is an expensive program. So I think for the public, when we broke it down into costs, that really kind of got the point across that this is an expensive thing to do, but it's so important to make sure that all children are able to equally access the theatre.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think one of the things that we've learned through the work of New Philanthropy for Arts and Culture, and indeed working in the arts, is the general public has a very low understanding of how much it costs to put on a performance. And I have spoken to any number of people who have bought tickets to go to a theatre or a production, or to go to a concert, and they think that by buying a ticket, that will essentially cover the cost of the performance. And all of us who work in the arts know that's not the case. So I think what you say about really clarifying what the costs are of a project and why the funding from a particular campaign will help is a very important part of that, just to explain the case, why it is that you need the money. I'm interested in the comms part also, that to what extent you talked about the impact on those participants, because I'm presuming that with your many year experience of putting on relaxed performances and so on and so forth, you will have lots of testimony and tributes from families who will have attended, which sort of highlight from somebody independent how worthwhile it is. And how did that feed into your campaign communications?
Yeah, we did use quite a lot of quotes and just personal responses in our comms to people. We had a lot of teachers from SEND school groups who we have a lot of brilliant quotes from that have been all compiled by our creative learning department over the past couple of years that we've used in our comms to just say, I don't think I have any with me that I could read to you off the cusp at the moment, but it's just things like, there's one that I can think of off the top of my head that's just like, we never thought that it would be possible to bring our children to experience a workshop like this, where they can really get involved and you can actually see how they're interacting more confidently with each other, how they're interacting more confidently with school material. Excuse me. So I think for us, including quotes and direct impact from people who have experienced our programs makes a really big difference.
And you're absolutely right that to have that third party endorsement is very valuable. I read a very interesting case study, which is actually on the Arts Philanthropy website, which was not so much to do with children with special needs, but to do with people who'd had strokes. And the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, which many of you will know, run a program called Strokestra, and they send musicians to work with people who've had strokes. But the tributes and the analysis of the impact of the program comes not from the arts administrators, because we're all excellent at saying how good our programs are, but from the medics, who can give real data on how. So the fact that you've sort of built testimony from teachers and from families, that is very powerful. So I suppose that's a very interesting lesson for people watching who want to build their campaign, is to what extent that they can build the messaging and the communications with such testimonials from third parties, so additional support for their work. So could you talk us through your sort of comms timeline a little bit? We don't have quite as much time for the Arts for Impact campaign as the Christmas campaign, because you talked about starting in July for a programme in December.
Yes.
So please please nobody panic about that, because it's already the 7th of February and this campaign's in March. So we've got a slightly truncated timeline compared to what you described. But we were talking a little bit on the seminar on Monday of the importance of PR, of the importance of clarity of message, and the importance of planning communications at regular points during the run up to and then during the week. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, Katie. Thank you.
Sure. So as you say, I knew that we were going to be doing this from way earlier, months in advance. So I did kind of spread out the messaging a little bit, probably more than some of you guys will be able to for the Arts for Impact campaign. But I'll just go through what I did. So after we had applied for the Christmas challenge, and after we had secured the champion pledgers, as I said, the next kind of bit of really marketing push that we did was for the big bash event, just because that is a kind of limited, there's only so many people who can sit in the theater. So that was kind of the first thing that we did for that. So we went out with that first. And that was kind of in September. We did the initial ticket release, emailed to our marketing database, and asked our trustees to share to their networks as well. Once that kind of started selling really well, then it kind of, because we've done it a few years as well, like the event itself kind of took off on its own. And I think it kind of started to sell out without us needing to do a huge amount more. We did kind of flutter in social media and a couple more emails here and there in our regular newsletters, but that kind of took off on its own. So after that, then we really started focusing on the two-pronged left, which was the actual big give and the auction. So in October, I sent an impact report to last year's Big Give donors, kind of how you would to just any other like sort of major donor or corporate funder. I just kind of went through what we were able to do with the Curtain Up program that they had helped to fund over the previous year. And I just kind of went into like, thank you so much. This is how many children we were able to reach. This is how many children were able to attend the theater because of your donation. I didn't ask them for anything. I just kind of kept that one as just a general report and thank you, just to kind of, in my mind, it was a kind of way to warm them up to the next ask, which I sent out about a month after that. So we also had another cultivation event in October. It was a puppet picnic is what we call them. So it's basically when we invite some, we invite some people that we're looking to cultivate or steward at the time to come and see a show with their children. And then after the performance, we take them into a small room where we have like kind of drinks and nibbles. And then they get to kind of play with the actors and the puppets that were used in the show. And then we use that as an opportunity to speak to the donors about plans that we have in the future and what we are looking to do with further donations. So normally for a puppet picnic, we would ask them then and there to join as a member or become a patron. But for this particular cultivation event in October, we just said, we're doing the Big Give in about a month's time. We would love it if you would consider donating as part of the Big Give so that we could get that match funding. And I think just being able to use the match funding as a kind of drive incentive to get people to donate, I think makes a big difference as well.
So I'm very excited about the way this is building up. We started with an impact report. Now, for people who are new to fundraising, they absolutely could follow the same route that you're describing. So instead of sending the impact report to existing donors, if they don't already have individual donors, then an impact report or a summary of the activity could be sent to potential donors, could be sent to trustees, could be sent to through audience members. And presumably, did you send that to all of your donors, or did you try and do some kind of segment the ones that you wanted to support this campaign?
We did kind of segment it out a bit, but we also do 2 more general impact updates annually anyway to our full fundraising database. So for this one in particular, we did just kind of focus on those we were particularly targeting for the Big Give.
Super. And then I love the idea of a cultivation event in the run up to, and again, for people who are new to this, a cultivation event could be as simple as, gathering people together for a pre performance drink, something very low key. It doesn't have to be a sort of specially curated event. And perhaps when we get to the end of your case study, there may be some questions about how to, implement some of these on a smaller organisation. So the cultivation event, we're sort of 6 weeks to go because we're in October. What happened next?
So after that, then in November, this is when we really started pushing forward with the Big Give campaign as well as the auction. So we changed our point of sale emails to, instead of saying, "Thank you for your donation, we really appreciate it, blah, 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 blah," we changed it to, "Thank you so much for your support. Did you know that in a month's time, we're going to be doing the Big Give campaign, during which if you donate then, your donation will be doubled, thanks to the generosity of the Childhood Trust and our match funders." This is when we had a blog post about the Big Give as well. So we kind of went into, really delved into the detail about what the Big Give is, what our access program is, why we were so keen to fund for it, and why it's so important to support children with accessibility and additional needs into the arts and culture activities, and how the match funding makes such a big impact to our fundraising. So why they should particularly support at this time. And then we sent that out in an email as well to the fundraising and marketing databases, just kind of explaining what it is and why we do it. And that kind of led us to the week of the Big Give, or the week just before the Big Give. So this is when the auction opened. So we sent an email out again to the marketing and fundraising databases to say, we're about to start the Big Give. You can support Polka by either donating directly to the Big Give or by participating in our auction. And this is when we kind of highlighted some of the biggest prizes and maybe the most accessible prizes as well. So some of them were things like holidays, which were quite expensive and probably out of reach for a lot of people. But then some of them were things like a birthday party at Polka, which normally costs, I think maybe £150 to hire out the space. So it's maybe more accessible to the general public, but it was still kind of a way to, it was kind of a double header as well, because it kind of promoted Polka as well as promoting the auction and the Big Give. So it was kind of a sneaky way that we did that. We started, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That your point is valid to any arts organisation, because not everybody will be able to sort of rustle up an auction between now and March. But what this campaign does enable you to do is to highlight all of the excellent work that's happening year round and all of the opportunities to support the organisation, but in particular the match funding by the Big Give. So I like the way that you described sort of sneakily sort of merging your comms and your stories such that people could choose the bits of the organisation that they were particularly motivated by.
Yeah, I think there were a couple auction prizes as well that were specifically Polka related, to again kind of do that sort of double hitting engagement. There was one in particular. We have a show coming up over the summer that is based on a book called, it's the Sam Wu book series, which are these really, really popular children's book series based on these authors that have an enormous social media presence. So because they allowed us to do, we're doing this show with them, and because they allowed us to use that as an auction prize, like tickets to the show, as well as meeting the authors after the press performance. They then shared it to their socials as well, which I think made an enormous impact to our overall fundraising. One of the things that we noted, which we were all really shocked by actually, was how many people donated and participated in the auction who we had never heard of before, which was a huge shock to all of us.
Well, I love that, given that my project is called New Philanthropy for Arts and Culture. The fact that you secured quite a few new people to support you that's incredibly powerful. I was going to ask you actually whether anything surprised you about the campaign. So there's the first thing, a whole lot of people you didn't know, which it's very hard to track how you might have found them, isn't it? Was it through the socials? Was it through the artists? Was it for the fact that you got communication channels which were different from your normal routes? Or perhaps it was part of the, the Big Give momentum, because the Christmas challenge and indeed the Arts Impact Fund will have sort of wider PR campaign for the whole initiative, all of which are surely beneficial.
Yeah, it's really hard to track. Obviously, we were only able to track our emails that we sent out or our social engagement. And then obviously we have, I think, something like 30,000 Twitter followers. So there's no really way to know who of those people who liked maybe our posts about the auction are also in our database. Their Twitter handle isn't necessarily going to be the same as their name in our CRM. But I think it was kind of a combination of putting things on our socials more and just getting that detail out on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, as well as getting any kind of celebrity or like really big name who was involved in donating one of the auction prizes to share it to their networks as well. Another one that we had was a recent MasterChef winner who donated the prize of coming into someone's home and doing a 5-course meal for 8. So because we were able to secure that prize, which was huge for us, she then shared it to her networks as well on her own social media. And I think that made a huge difference.
And I suppose, I mean, I was saying before that probably most organisations couldn't rustle up an auction between now and the week of the 19th of March. However, that's not to say people couldn't have a couple of prizes or which could be tickets for shows which are publicised as part of the same campaign. So there's an added incentive for people to get involved. Maybe it's that everybody who contributes to your Big Give campaign would be eligible to go into a raffle, and the prize of that might be a pair of 2 tickets, or it might be to meet an artist who's coming to perform, or it might be something aligned to that. So I like the idea of creating a sort of prize winning mentality as well as and alongside the philanthropic donations. Was there anything else that surprised you? I mean, I think one thing that surprised you was you ended up with a lot more money than you were planning to. You exceeded your target substantially.
Yeah, that was definitely a big surprise. We were all like absolutely thrilled. I know I keep banging on about the auction. I think it did make the biggest difference to the overall campaign. There was one prize that people kind of started a bidding war against it. And when we put it on our Instagram as well, then we could like track from the platform that we used for the auction online. We could see people just going at it. Started being like 5 people, and then it kind of went down to 2. And over the course of the last 24 hours, they were just kind of bidding against each other. And the top prize for the auction ended up going for $5,500, which was enormous. And we were so thrilled by the success that had. And again, the auction winner was someone that we had never heard of. And I don't even know how he learned about it in general. I need to get in touch with him actually. But so that was kind of the biggest surprise.
I was literally about to ask whether your auction participants and indeed the donors that you didn't know before are now engaged with the theatre on an ongoing basis, because that, for me, that is the win, that you participate in the campaign, you attract donations from people that you may or may not know, but then the people that you didn't know before then become part of your family, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. The ones who we had never been in touch with before, we kind of wanted to make sure that they got their prize first and were able to like experience that. And then the plan was to kind of get in touch with them again after they had claimed whatever their prize was. So this one in particular who won the 5.5K, he hasn't actually claimed his prize yet. So once he does that, then I'll get back in touch with him and kind of start conversations with him. Yeah. I guess another thing that I would say in general that surprised me is that lots of other theaters, people, organizations were surprisingly very happy to give us auction prizes. So I do think in general, it is always worth reaching out and asking. We had very few no's if we put the ask out and just explained what it was for. We offered people, we had an event program as well. So we offered anybody who donated an auction prize their logo in the event program and thank you on Twitter to just kind of be able to kind of have that reciprocal arrangement with them. But genuinely, most people were very, very happy to donate something towards the campaign. So I would say just go for it if you're thinking about doing something similar in your own organization.
Super. Thank you very much. So I just a couple more questions. I'm conscious of time and I want to leave some time for people participating in this webinar to ask questions, either of the Big Give team or of Katie or of myself. So is there anything you would do differently another time? That was one question. It sounds like it was enormously successful, so it's totally fine if the answer to that question is no.
I think it was enormously successful. I think the auction was a big part of that. So I think for next year, we are planning to do the Christmas challenge again. I would like to try and get more engagement directly with the donations themselves rather than maybe with the more reciprocal prize winning option of donating. So I think in the future, I would maybe do some kind of leaflet with a QR code that directly links to the Big Give site, and maybe put it on every seat for every performance in the build up to the Big Give until it closes. Have something out at box office so anybody who comes into the theater can see it and take it. Maybe I would talk to our box office staff as well and see if at the end of every phone conversation they can also say, did you know we're doing the Big Give campaign this week? If you donate now, your donation will be doubled. Just kind of things like that. That's kind of more strictly philanthropic. Just to, again, more about the engagement of ensuring that anybody who comes into Polka knows that we are a charity, and just kind of getting that information out there that we do a lot of work for the community.
I think what you said is very important, particularly for organisations who've not done this before. The QR code, I mean, hopefully everybody knows that when they're participating in the campaign, there will be a unique sort of microsite URL within the Big Give page, which will highlight each of your organisations and so what you're fundraising for and sort of what the impact of your work is. But your point about the box office is well made. One of the questions that we at MPAC are often asked is, how do you find people to ask for money? Because asking for money is quite different from selling a ticket. And I would absolutely ask anyone who's on your database or anyone who's on an audience. So your idea of sort of folding that into the box office, folding that into the emails that you send out when people book tickets, and that can start now. You can start to advertise the Big Give campaign as soon as the arrangement with Big Give are confirmed. And so I suppose my final question, then we'll throw the Q&A open to the floor, and hopefully Sahil and Beth are busily collating questions. I can see a few things have popped up in the Q&A box. What advice would you give charities who are new to the Big Give? This is obviously something that your theatre has done several times before, and huge congratulations for your success. But for people who've not done this before, how would you advise them to just get started?
I think the biggest thing for me, because this was the first year I had done it as well, I would try planning out your comms well in advance and kind of knowing what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, so that you can coordinate with your marketing teams as well and anybody else internally to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page and everybody is aware of what's going out when and what the exact comms are, what the ask is. Definitely utilize the resources the Big Give provide. One of the things that we did this year as well was we worked with the Big Give PR branch to produce a magazine spread of one of our patrons, Joanna Lumley, who specifically talked about the Big Give and why we're doing it this year. So that was in Hello Magazine in the week before the Big Give, which was brilliant. And then I would also say maybe just kind of be flexible with your comms campaign as well. I think some of the things that we had planned, if some things worked better than others in the end, there's no sense, say, so for us, the Big Bash, the tickets sold really fast, and we had all these plans to implement more comms about selling tickets to the event, but then there was no sense in doing that when the tickets sold out. So we just kind of had to be a little bit flexible and kind of change the way that we made the ask as the campaign went on. Just keep on top of things, see what the trends are, and try and get on top of it that way.
Super. Katie, thank you very much for sharing the experience of your campaign. Please stay here for a second. Sahil, I'd like to open the Q&A up to the group. If you've got some questions from the Q&A chat that Katie or I can answer, or you or Beth for that matter.
Yes, we actually have quite a few questions to go through. So great. Thanks to everyone for posting them in. I'll kick off with Tin Arts. They've asked, if ticket sales for an event are part of the Big Give, how does that money get donated during the campaign week? Katie, I don't know if you want to answer this, but I'm also happy to give advice here as well.
I think it'd be good to hear from tip on that actually, because a ticket is a sale of a ticket is not technically a donation. So, Sahil, what's the big give approach to that sort of?
Yeah. So what we advise where charities do want to use those proceeds from like the event ticket sales is that you can do that, but what would have to happen is that you'd have to collect the proceeds and then someone working for the charity would have to donate those proceeds using their personal like bank card, because we have that blanket ban that charities cannot donate to their own campaigns. Obviously here is like our advice is talk to your finance team about this, and the governance policy and all of that. But that's how we have suggested charities go about that process.
I mean, we had a conversation at the seminar on Monday, which was the importance of, well, I called it no cheating. So the sort of talked about was, having regular donors just retime their donation, or getting one single donation to cover the entirety of the match funding grant that you've been allocated from the Arts Impact Fund. I suppose in my mind, sort of diverting ticket sales, that does feel a little bit like cheating, because what we're trying to do, to the benefit of all participating organisations, is to get more people to give you money. So if you just, box up, rob Peter to pay Paul, you haven't actually got incremental income, aside from the match, of course. So I would really encourage people to focus on using the opportunity of the matching to invite additional donations rather than repurpose ticket income.
I probably confused people with what I said earlier as well about it with the event ticket sales. The ticket sales just went to our regular stream. They didn't go into the big give at all. And the additional donation that was part of the ticket sales, we also didn't put back into the big give. We just kind of used it as a way to say this money goes into access, which is also what the big give supports. So the money didn't kind of cross back into the big give that way. It was just kind of our way of kind of collating the whole experience into one overall fundraising campaign that had the different strands.
Super, thank you. What's the next question, Sahil?
I'm happy to ask this one. Yeah. There's one here, Katie, that asks how big your marketing and fundraising team are.
The fundraising team, there's 4 of us, and the marketing team, there are 5 of them. So quite small, but not tiny either. We're a very small but busy team.
They will probably, those numbers will sound quite big to some of the small organisations who will be participating. So I suppose the lessons that we can take from your excellent case study is all about sort of planning the comms, but within the confines of the resources that each organisation has. Very conscious
and also
of time,
good to say, we have case studies on our website available in the resources section, and there are charities there who have marketing teams of 1 or 2, so it might be a bit more relatable for some charities who are a bit smaller. But the next question is, how did you collect auction prizes that were not directly polka related?
These were kind of just, we put out asks to anybody that we had a relationship with. Because we're a theater, we've done a few things with the Royal Opera House before. They've done some like baby ballets that we've also kind of got on board with. So we were able to ask the Royal Ballet for a prize, and they donated a really brilliant prize for us. The director of the Royal Ballet is also one of our patrons, so that we had that relationship established. The National Theater, we just reached out to the director of development and said, we're having this big give campaign. We would love it if you are able to offer any kind of thing to help us fundraise for this really important program. And they were able to give us a couple tickets to a press performance. It was just kind of basically just utilizing any kind of relationship that you have, utilizing the relationship that your trustees might have as well with their personal or professional networks. A lot of them know people who have things like holiday homes that they were able to donate. So we were able to use things like that as well. And then it's just, we've gone out to the high street near us with asks about restaurants, and even those guys were able to give us a few vouchers and things like that. So I think just don't be afraid to make asks.
That's excellent advice. I also am very supportive generally of larger scale arts organisations helping smaller scale arts organisations. So it's generally the case that a large scale theatre has got the ability to make 2 tickets available, for example. Thank you. That's very helpful. What's next?
There's a question here asking, could I ask for a little bit of clarity on how the auction linked to the Big Give campaign? Was it just a parallel campaign that raised awareness, or did the payment pay into the Big Give campaign for match funding? They just wanted a little bit of clarity over that. Yeah.
Yeah, so for the auction, this one did link more directly than the event ticket sales. So anyone who we closed the auction the day before the Big Give closed. So anyone who won a prize, we sent them a link to donate what they had bid towards the Big Give. We did, I will say here that it's really important if you do something like this where you're offering people a prize that you keep gift aid separate, because we organized all the gift aid applications ourselves rather than through the Big Give, who I knew offered to do it, because we're not able to gift aid anyone who's won a prize because they've got something out of it. So I will just make sure to say that if you do anything like that, just make sure that you keep that really separated. And we also, as part of the auction, anyone who didn't win a prize, we also sent them a link to say, thank you for trying to bid to support Polka. We're sorry that you weren't successful in your bid, but you can still support by just donating directly to the Big Give.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Katie. One more directly for Big Give team, so maybe Sahil, you could do this. Will the donor report also give contact details for us to build our CRM?
Yes, so all charities will have access to a donor report, which is updated throughout the campaign as donations come in. So you can download that from your campaign dashboard. It will have all the necessary donor details, so who they are, how much they donated, etc. We ask all donors when they're making a donation if they want to opt in to receiving further communications from you, the charity. Where they have said yes, we will provide their email addresses in that donor report, and you can obviously add them to your mailing databases. We also provide the home addresses of donors, but that is only to be used for gift aid purposes if you're claiming gift aid yourself. Our terms and conditions and privacy policy don't cover charities contacting donors via direct mail. So you can only add donor emails from that donor report to your mailing list and then contact them.
Thanks, Sahil. This one potentially for Anna or Katie. Our capacity right now is really small and our charity is super small with no fixed venue or public-facing open events coming up. If there's one thing you'd prioritize, what would it be?
Oh, shall I have a go? I think it would be telling your story. You know, you might not have events coming up in the next few weeks, but for sure you have events and activities and beneficiaries and social impact. So make sure that you have all of those things tied together into a very powerful case for support, and share those with your stakeholders, and ask your board, your trustees, your volunteers, audience members, people on your database to do the same.
That's great, thank you. I'll go ahead, Sahil.
Sorry, yeah, there was a question before, forget, from Mark Bain. So he was asking, were there any privacy and electronic communications regulation, data protection, basically, considerations when with converting those point of sales emails into promoting the campaign, or were these promotional emails anyway? I'm not sure if you know that. Kate would have the answer to that, Katie. So
The general answer to that is the GDPR legitimate interest. So if someone who's on your mailing list and has bought a ticket has a legitimate interest in learning about the success of the theatre, then it's perfectly legitimate to share with them the Big Give campaign. I actually, I'd like to know from Katie how the Polka deals with it, but I went to a seminar when GDPR came in, and I asked them this particular question: is it okay? They used an analogy of, if you're in a furniture shop, if someone buys a chair, can you sell them a table? And I said, well, what if they buy a ticket? Can I sell them a donation scheme? And the answer came back yes. So there's a legitimate interest justification there.
Exactly. That's kind of how we have been able to use that kind of marketing and fundraising a little bit slightly more flexibly in terms of GDPR, just using that legitimate interest, especially because we do say that the Big Bash is fundraising for the Access program, and it all ties in to our overall campaign for the Big Give. So we kind of tie it all in together in terms of the comms, so that we are able to say that it is all legitimate interest.
Super.
Thanks. We have a question here from Emma. She said, I may have missed this, but you mentioned that your campaign had 3 strands. What proportion did you achieve through the Big Give?
Oh, well, it's hard to kind of say exactly because the Big Bash doesn't actually directly go into the Big Give. I guess it would be 0 for the actual event. And then in terms of the auction versus the straight campaign, basically, as I said, after the auction closed, we asked anybody who won their bid to donate what they had bid towards the Big Give. And I think that raised something like, I can't find the actual numbers here at the moment. I would say it was about 2/3 of the overall target towards the Big Give, and the rest of it was just straight philanthropic donations. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier about planning for next year, is that I'd really like to see more of the philanthropic side in future.
What I think is interesting about that is that, of course, you ran the one campaign, you didn't run 2 in parallel with each other. So you don't know what the auction participants would have given if there hadn't been an auction prize. Because if you look back at prior campaigns that you have run successfully, I'm guessing they haven't all involved an auction, or have they?
I think they have, actually. I think we have done it, yeah.
I mean, I think the Big Give data would show that people participating, for the most part, not everybody runs an auction. So for the most part, people participating in the Christmas challenge campaign do manage to reach their targets. There was a Sahil, I'm going to get this wrong. It was something like in the 90% of the amount across the entire campaign that people achieved.
So last year was 73 that hit their target. I think the stat which you may be referring to is 90% of charity, or 92% of charities got at least one donation from a completely new supporter, but 73% hit their target overall.
Super, thank you.
The very last question here I've got in the Q&A box is, when you change the message at the point of give on your website to a message about the Big Give, do you mean before someone makes a donation? So then they didn't make the donation then, but would come back during the Big Give time to make that donation. I think you slightly answered that already, but yeah.
Yeah, basically, normally it would just be a thank you for donating whilst also buying your ticket. We changed the messaging to say, again, thank you for your donation, because this would be after someone has already donated at point of sale. So instead of just saying thank you, we would say, thank you for donating. Did you know if you donate again during this week, your donation will then be doubled? I kind of wonder, while I was going through this call, actually, if there was a way to change the point of sale donations during the Big Give campaign, if we could link that donation directly to the Big Give site. So instead of, so that if people did want to donate at point of sale, instead of donating through our platforms, they could just be linked to the Big Give so that their donation would be doubled. I don't know if that is something we'd be able to do. I think we would have to talk about it in terms of our marketing team and our platforms, but
that sounds like a tech.
I think, yeah.
But some charities have done that, where they have a donation button on their website, and then during the campaign week, they've just redirected that button to their Big Give campaign page to avoid losing those donations, which could be matched.
That's a great idea. Super. So it sounds like we've got to the end of the questions in the Q&A. Sahil, Bethan, thank you very much for putting this together. And I think all of us would like to thank Katie for her insights on obviously a very successful campaign. And for me, there were lots of interesting lessons to take away, regardless of the size of your organisation, and also regardless of the art form in which you're specialist. So Katie, huge thank you from NPAC, but also from Team Big Give.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And yeah, we have the webinar on Friday, the Ask Us Anything webinar. So join us for that. Just throw all of your questions at Team Big Give and Anna from NPAC, and we'll get through as many questions as possible. But in the meantime, I hope everyone has a great day. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.